Hello everyone, my name is Peter Schaknat. I am the Managing Director of Schaknat Electronic GmbH, and today we're optimizing a Scania 77R. Today we really have a beautiful car here. You know, I often say we have a beautiful car here, but today it's really true. Awesome, a 770 Scania. You see, my favorite color is black. My hood is also black. Black is the most inconvenient color of all, but when it's clean, it's really awesome. So the customer really put in the effort and made the truck absolutely spotless. It's a Scania 770R. A few key facts about it. DC16 V8 engine. So this is the most powerful, or was the most powerful production truck in the world. Now it's been surpassed by the 780 Volvo, which is also a great truck in terms of engine. But of course, that's a 6-cylinder, while Scania only offers the V8. 8 cylinders, 16.4 liters of displacement with 3,700 Newton meters of torque. This vehicle still has the old transmission. That's the CMS2 gearbox, the synchronized one. I actually prefer the old transmissions because you can adjust them more precisely and finely. I also think, in terms of comfort, especially when driving on tough construction sites, I almost always find these transmissions better because you can intervene more individually and fine-tune them more precisely. As you can see from the chassis, this is a 6x4 with stub axles. It also has a tandem trailer attached at the back, so it's a typical construction site vehicle. The customer also always pulls a low loader with it. Of course, he's operating in a mountainous region, so he really needs the power. They do a lot of work in the forest, on forest roads, and that sort of thing. And that's why he said he would buy another V8. It's really a heavy-duty vehicle because he simply needs the power. This way, it's really versatile in its use. And you really have to say, the newer V8s are also very good in terms of fuel consumption nowadays. Honestly, that's true, you really have to say that. So compared to earlier models, these vehicles now use significantly less fuel even in their original state. Of course, it's not entirely comparable to a 6-cylinder, but you get a different level of performance. Briefly about the process. Today, we will optimize the engine and transmission with our app. First and foremost, the customer's goal here is really to further optimize the vehicle. Especially because he mentioned wanting to refine the shifting. This is particularly important when doing light towing work, like on forest roads, where you always need to let the vehicle pull steadily, continuously. That's something we're also trying to fine-tune. And of course, let's see if he can join our 4,000 Newton meter club. As I said, with 3,700 Newton meters stock, that shouldn't be a problem. As you can see, it's still a heavy drivetrain, so we'll measure it. 6x4 locked. We'll take a look at the performance together on the monitor. We'll be looking specifically and in detail at the wheel power only, focusing solely on that aspect. It's always extremely important to me that customers fully understand exactly what kind of power loss I actually have in my setup. Here you can see engine, transmission, drive shaft all the way to the back, everything fully locked. All the way through the transmissions, transfer case, when you have everything, the differentials, until it really reaches the wheel hub at the tire, what actually arrives at the rear. So, as I said, it's always important to me that people understand this. I often get questions like same power but a different rear axle ratio, or the same power as a 6x2 or 6x4. It's obvious. A longer wheelbase or a different drivetrain naturally also causes losses, or a longer gear ratio, of course, results in different losses as well. So, in order to make this a bit more tangible, we'll take a look at it on the monitor. All right, Andre has already strapped down the car and activated the dyno mode so that VMAX and ABS are switched off and so that the distance temperature sensors and emergency brake assistance don't kick in. Then I'd say, let's do the initial measurement and then we'll meet at the monitor. Andre has now completed the initial measurement. The noise level is absolutely brutal. Those coarse tread tires, honestly, it's almost like a jet engine. The sheer noise they produce here is truly unbelievable. So it was interesting, as I said, also for the customers to hear something like this, because we always have the issue that people often say the engine sounds too loud. But actually, it's the tires that are the loud part for us on the test bench. All right, let's take a look together. Let's look at the initial measurement again now. You can see it down here. We have the RPM range from 800 to 2200 revolutions again. On the right here, we see the torque axis, and on the left, we see the horsepower axis. The bottom two curves, just for comparison, are from runs 10 and 11. And once 11, gear that we also measured the direct gear again. Direct gear always means engine, gearbox, rear axle. We always measure where we have the most direct drive, where we have the least loss. You always have to look, depending on the 10th, 11th, 12th. Some have overdrive transmission so that we really have the direct gear ratio. But with this transmission, it's the 11th gear. And this is what I just mentioned. If we take a closer look here, it's supposed to have 3,700 Newton meters at the engine. And you can see here we have just about 3,239 Newton meters of torque at the wheel. So that's what actually arrives at the wheel in the back, locked in 6x4. It can't be that the models with the stub axle, specifically a 6x4, lose 140 horsepower. You can see right at the top here, we have a peak power at the wheel of just under 840 horsepower. If we add those 140 horsepower, we're going to be almost exactly at a total of 770 horsepower. In fact, we're even 10 horsepower above that at 780 horsepower. And you can see what always shocks me, even myself. You see, we actually have a loss of almost 500 Newton meters of torque. That's really enormous. If you think about it, a current passenger car with a 2-liter diesel or even the smaller 3-liter diesels already have an original engine torque of 500 Newton meters just from the engine alone. And here I have a loss of 500 Newton meters just in the drivetrain. Of course, if I had the V-frame as a completely normal 4x2 with a standard axle shaft with the lighter axles, meaning the light rear axle, then I might only have a loss of 60 to 70 horsepower there. But the heavier the drivetrain, because you need a 6x4 on the construction site, you immediately have double the loss. So you end up with 140 horsepower lost. It's just interesting to see something like this. All right, then I'll quickly flash the app with the customer. We'll quickly show you that in the video. Then we'll do the initial measurement in the truck, and then we'll see each other again at the monitor. We're going to quickly flash the vehicle together now. As I said, this is Alex, a very good driver. You see the car is spotless for us, cleaned up perfectly for the video. We're now flashing with the Schaknat adapter. Let's quickly show you how it's done. As you can see down here on the bottom right, like I said, you know, Alex, you go here, plug in the OBD connector. It only goes in one way. Then you can hear the adapter powering up. So now you go ahead and open it. Open the app, then go to connect to the vehicle. We've released the new update. Go to scanner. Exactly, you can connect that to the vehicle. That's the great thing about the new adapter. It connects automatically. Like I said, it's easier for the customers. You know it from the older vehicles, you had to connect it separately. Now it's much simpler. With the layout of the new update, you can see here that you have engine control and transmission control. Down here you have the TTCs, the diagnostics, the trouble codes. That's what I always say, if you can read the error memory. So now let's go to the engine control unit. First and foremost, we said we want to save fuel and optimize the engine and transmission with all of this. But I'm also allowed to join the 4,000 Newton meter club, right? Yeah, of course. So now I would go to the test bench because people are interested in that, and we'll flash the power optimization now. Exactly, confirm it. Then start. The flash process on these models typically takes about 1.5 to 2 minutes. During those 1.5 to 2 minutes, it's absolutely important, like we always say, not to interrupt anything at all, don't take any calls, the usual things, don't read any messages, so that nothing gets interrupted. Because it's obvious, if I'm transferring data to a USB stick on the PC and I pull it out, the data won't be on it either. Then it won't work either. That's why it's important to me not to interrupt anything there. But knock on wood. So far, we've already flashed a bunch and nothing has ever happened. You can also recover it. I've never damaged a control unit so far, but of course, we want to have as few complaints as possible. And that's why we clearly state in our instructions that you shouldn't do that. Right, now we're already at 80%. So now you can see we've finished flashing. Now in the background we also heard something briefly. After the engine optimization, the transmission comes next, always separately. That's always very important because many of our competitors say you don't need to optimize the transmission, but it could be a transmission that strongly limits torque. You have to optimize the transmission as well, both engine and transmission, because otherwise the torque gains won't make any difference. You can also save energy if you change the torque settings, and that's why we're working on the transmission now. You go to the transmission control unit. Here you simply select power, exactly continue, and the transmission responds a bit faster. Now in the background you can hear it immediately. You heard it, click, click. The transmission has already been flashed. Now, the engine and the transmission are fully synchronized with each other. You can always adjust the torque values and all of the shift cycles individually for yourself whenever you need to. Depending on your application, I always tell people, just give it a try. Try setting the engine to eco and the transmission to power, or the other way around, and see where the fuel consumption is best. Alright, now let's move on to the last section, DTCs. Here, we can read and clear the error memory with a level of quality that no one else offers today. So not just the raw error codes, but also the actual descriptions. Now we've included all languages for everyone, because translation is always a bit of an issue. But of course, the important engine and transmission systems, that is the drivetrain, are all covered. But we also constantly provide updates so that our customers really have all the control units properly identified and labeled, and so that you can clear all of them cleanly. You see, that takes a moment as well, because it's now scanning all the control units. Then the whole thing moves down, then we trigger all the error messages, and then simply clear all of them at once. Of course, the bottle has a lot of CAN bus errors in it. Or from before, if you ever disconnect a battery or things like that, you'll also have CAN bus errors. And this way you can just clear things like that anytime. Exactly, you see it has been cleared, then we go back again. If you're now on the main level, I just heard in the background that the adapter has automatically disconnected again. You can unplug the adapter now, and with that, we're already done. As I said, all the explanation videos, detailed videos, we also have them online. So feel free, if customers have questions or anything else, always feel free to take a look. Everything is really explained super well there. That's exactly why we make the detailed videos. And then I'd say, let's go ahead and do the output measurement, right? Great, yes. I'm going to start the output measurement now. You can see inside here, the truck is really cool. It's a nice piece of work. But you always have to remember this is a construction site vehicle. So people drive it around in the dirt. And to keep cars this clean and so spotless, it's easy to forget that. The car is now 2 years old. You can also see here, it still has the old display. I love the overall feel and driving experience of these cars, and also especially this part here. Segment display, partly digital. I think it's great. I don't understand why they made everything fully digital in the new ones. Nowadays, everything is digital, but I think having a bit of an analog display just belongs there somehow. For example, I don't like it when it goes up. I always prefer it going from left to right. A round display, I just like it much better. But of course, it's always a matter of taste, but it really is a beautiful car. That's why I want to do the baseline measurement now. We're going back up in 11th gear now. Shifting up through the gears, we went all the way through, 6x4. As you can see, we now have the ABS control and everything in place. Since we also installed the test bench engine, we're going to run the tires briefly again, just to warm them up a bit. The measurement principle is always the same. We measure all the way from the bottom to the top. We measure the torque during the acceleration run. And when I disengage the clutch and let it coast, we measure the power loss. But in this case, that's not so important because the last axle isn't being braked down. So those are more like calculated values. That's why, with the 6x4, I always prefer to measure the wheel power, because that's what I can really measure with 100% accuracy. Because honestly, those are the most accurate values I can get. The torque at the wheel, that's the only thing I can actually measure. It's also the most precise. Everything else is extrapolated values, a theoretical calculation. Even when I'm doing development work, I always look at the wheel power, because that's when I have the most effective value. The speed matches up, everything fits. Now I'm applying the brakes. Now you'll notice that I'm letting the RPM drop, letting it drop, down to 850 revolutions. Now the eddy current brake is starting to apply resistance. Now you can clearly hear it. The turbocharger is beginning to start up and spin, Section 2. Now let's preload just a bit and let's gently brake against it for a moment. You always have to give the brake a moment to slightly react. Then we start the measurement. Brutal. This thing is crazy. So much torque, insane. With a chassis like this, I really have a great deal of respect because honestly, it's still wild. The measurement here is actually really quite intense. So, we'll do one or two more now. Of course, we'll keep it locked in. Obviously, I'm not going to do 20 or 30 measurements now because as you can see, we're running at very high speeds here. Naturally, we also want to make sure we don't break anything. Sure, with a locked axle, not much can happen, but I always make sure we do 3 input and 3 output measurements. Alright, I'll take the measurement now, and then we'll meet at the monitor to look at the values together. That's something I just wanted to quickly show you. As you can see, since we're measuring 6x4 and the tires are already a bit worn, the rear roller is being pushed up slightly. And here, at the roller where we're measuring here on the roller, actually over these 10 centimeters, we're pulling down with the hydraulic cylinder. Because if you touch it here, it's like a Formula One tire, licks. So, as you can see, you really have to take 2 or 3 measurements each time. Otherwise, you really can't accurately measure the power output on the test bench because the torque generated is so incredibly strong that even though I'm braking very slowly and carefully, it still starts to slip. And of course, if it spins on the roller, then the tire, or the cyclist, gets hot due to the increased friction and heat buildup. Just a little anecdote so you can see what that's like. So, I'm looking at the monitor. I've now done the baseline measurement, so really, right? Goosebumps. Like I said, Alex, you were standing right next to it. The noise level is brutal, isn't it? Yeah, it's interesting to see something like that. It's really brutal to measure the car like that. Alex, I'll briefly explain the baseline power and also the baseline torque, which is the essential and crucial part. You can see here from 800 down to 200 revolutions. Here you can see the individual support points going up. The 2 lower curves are the torque, so that's the torque axis you see here, which is shown on this graph. And on the left, the top 2 curves. That's the horsepower axis. As you can see earlier on, we measured just under 630 in terms of peak power. And here, looking at the torque curve, where it drops off so sharply, you can clearly see down here, it already manages to maintain almost 3,750 Newton meters at 900 revolutions per minute. And don't forget, we're talking about wheel power here. So I specifically said wheel power measured directly, 3,750 Newton meters at the wheel. That's actually what that's what an engine actually has, so that's already gigantic. You can see it holds it down there linearly, brutally well, and maintains it for a very, very long time. So especially at 1600, that's when it only starts to drop off. And of course, when it comes to peak power, you can see we have just under 800 horsepower, 802 horsepower at the wheels, so that's really sensational. Especially in this case, as we've already discussed, when you go into the mountains, it has it in a topographical situation where it goes up and down, that the engine is elastic. As I said, if the EKB shifts incorrectly, it might drop into a certain RPM range, but it doesn't just collapse right away. Instead, it's simply more elastic. And of course, that's also what directly affects overall fuel consumption, which is an area where you can really save. All right, just for the record, if we add 140 horsepower to 800 horsepower, we reach a total of 940 horsepower, and if you at 3,725 Newton meters, we then have a total of 4,225 Newton meters. Alex, congratulations on joining the 4,000 Newton meter club. Andre, 4,000 Newton meters club. Bravo. Joking aside, the main focus is on fuel savings. As I said, in your area of operation, it's still about the engine and transmission, as you've seen. I think with this car, you'll easily save 5 to 6 liters. Also, as I tell customers, your feedback is very important. When the video comes out, feel free to leave a comment about how satisfied you are, what the fuel consumption is really truly like. I'm very satisfied, and I honestly hope you are too. Very much so, definitely. As I said, it was a pleasure. Glad you were here. Thank you. We'll be in touch. All the best to you. See you then. Yeah. We've reached the end of our video again about engine and transmission optimization for Scania. This is the 770R. It was really fun to measure this monster, the torque monster. Also with our Schaknat app. So I have to say it again and again, as you saw, how quick and easy it is, how quickly you can actually switch the optimization. Power is always a result of torque, but as I said, first and foremost, it's really about fuel consumption, because the efficiency is simply there. And now you can do it with your phone in under 2 minutes. So it's really a great thing. If you're interested in this product, feel free to check out our website at www.schaknat.de. You can also give us a call, send us an email or a WhatsApp message, and we can give you personal advice. So thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you next time.